This is the lesson for Chapter 2, Section 1, Congruent Figures. And the first set of directions asks us to name the corresponding angles and the corresponding sides. Now, it says that the figures are congruent. So let's real quick talk about what that word represents. And so when we talk about the word congruent, we mean the same size and shape is what we're looking at. Now, it's important to understand what the corresponding parts are, because corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So that's what we're kind of leading into, is being able to describe whether two figures are congruent or not, and that's why we're looking at this. And so we have to understand what corresponding angles and corresponding sides are. And corresponding just represents what we look at as matching. Kind of matching angles and matching sides. And so ones that if we were to take the image and place it right on top, they would line up. And so that's what we're looking for here. And so we're going to start with corresponding angles. And so once we write down that, we could just say what the two angles are, since we don't have to write the word corresponding each time. And so we'll look at those corresponding angles, and I look at A, and A here corresponds to J. And so that's what we'd say. We'd say angle A is my symbol for angle. Notice that this symbol has a horizontal line and then a line going up at an angle. And that just represents angle. So this is angle A. And angle A and angle J are corresponding angles. And so we'll just continue naming them. And so this angle right here, we'll put two arcs to show that angle K and B are the same, and angle B corresponds to angle K. Then we have another one right here. I'll use a different mark this time. I'll draw an arc and then one line through it. Sometimes you'll see that, signifying that those two angles are the same. And they are because they say they're congruent and they are corresponding angles. So angle C and angle L are corresponding. And the last one here, we'll say angle D, and I'll use two marks to signify it's the same as angle M. And those two angles are the same. So angle D and angle M are corresponding angles, and they also are the same. So then it also asked us to signify or write down or name the corresponding sides. So we'll list those corresponding sides. And when I look at the side, I'm going to start with side AB. And so AB, use the line on top representing a line segment, and AB, and now if I look at A to B, I'm going to start with A, since A is corresponds to J. I'm going to start with J and go to the one that corresponds to B, which is K. So JK are corresponding sides, AB and JK. And then maybe you'll go to BC, and so BC and KL correspond. And then we'll move on to CD. And so as I look at C to D, notice how I put these marks here. They kind of match these two marks here. And so that would be LM. And the last one here will go DA. So from D to A, if you look at those marks, this mark here matches this mark here, A and J match. So we would say and M or MJ. So those are the corresponding angles and sides of the first one. Let's take a look at the next one. Now the next one's a little bit more difficult because when we look at it, it's not exactly the same. What they did is if I go ahead and take this image right here and I move it right over here, you'll notice that what we ended up seeing is this item, this image is actually flipped or reflected across an axis like this. And so M and S correspond. So that's what we're going to see here. So let's go ahead and show that. So we'll write down, I'll write it over here, corresponding angles. And we'll see M and S correspond, so angle M and angle S. And then N and R, this wasn't my R here, I just took off the leg of it there. So angle N and angle R correspond. And then if I look at J, J would go to Q. So angle J and angle Q. And then over here, K to P, so angle K and angle P. And over here, L and T, so angle L and angle T. So those are my corresponding angles, and then taking a look at the corresponding sides, I would do the same thing I did on the last. So I'll start with N and M. So N, M. And as I look at that, I want to find the side that corresponds to N, and that'd be R, and then the one that corresponds to M would be S. So I would say RS. And so I'll just work my way around, M to L. And then I would say and M to L would be S to T. S to T. And, oops, not S. I was looking at the wrong, let's see here. Yes, that's right. M to L, and then S to T. I was thinking of angles for a moment there. And I've done ML, so let's go L to K. LK. LK would correspond to this one right here. So since I started L, I go to T. It goes T to P. T to P. And then I'll go K to J. And that would lead me from P to Q. And I think I've got one more here, J to N. And J to N would go from Q to R. So those are the corresponding sides. Now let's take a look at another set of problems, and it's this one. It says, tell whether the two figures are congruent. So remember, congruent means same shape and size. So basically the angles need to be the same inside. The interior angles need to be the same, but it also has to be the same size as well, so that the lengths of the corresponding sides need to be the same. So same corresponding angles, same corresponding sides. So we look at this one, and here we have 2 marks, and here we have 2 marks. Here we have 1 mark, and we have the same as this on this triangle as well. So this is an isosceles triangle. And we look at the sides, and we've got 5 and 5, which we have the same sides here, 5 and 5, and then 6 and 6. So yes, this is congruent, and we would say yes, congruent, because the figures have the same shape and size. Another way to say that is the corresponding angles and sides are congruent. It means they're the same. And since they're the same, then the figures are congruent as well. So looking at this one, these are definitely the same shape, but not the same size. Here we have 3, and here we have 5. So these are not equal. Not equal. And we see the same thing over here. 8 and 6 are not equal. And so because of that, we would say not congruent. And they're not congruent because the sizes are not the same. So the corresponding sides must be the same length in order for those to be congruent. Let's take a look at another one here. And on this one, it says that the tops of the desks are identical. So when we see that word identical, that tells us that they are congruent. It means they are the same size and same shape. So if we look at what is the length of NP, well, NP is not given to us. But since these are two congruent figures, we look to see what corresponds to NP. And we see that EF corresponds to NP. So if you look at NP, it's the same position as E and F. And E and F is 3 feet. So this would equal 3 feet. And looking at this next one, it said side AB is congruent to side CD. So AB is congruent to side CD. Now there's a way to show that with just symbols, and this is it. If we draw a congruent symbol, it's like an equals sign with a squiggly line on top, which is our similar sign. Similar just means same shape. And since it's the same shape and size, we draw this symbol. And so since those two are congruent, they want to know what is the length of AB. Well, neither of them is given to us, so we don't have either one of these. So what we have to do is look to the other figure. And we look at that, and we see that JK corresponds to AB. So JK corresponds to AB. So that means those are equivalent. They're equal. They're congruent. And here, LM corresponds to CD. And so those are congruent. We know those are the same because they say they're congruent. It says AB is congruent to CD. Well, if AB and JK are the same, LM and CD are the same, that means that those two are going to end up being equal. And we know that this, CD, and LM both are 6 feet, so that's what LM is. And so we have that at 6 feet. And if LM is congruent to JK, then that would equal 6 feet. Those would equal 6 feet. And therefore, since JK is congruent to AB, that would mean it's 6 feet as well. So 6 feet, that is the length of AB. Those are problems that you're going to see on tonight's assignment, at least on Chapter 2, Section 1.